Welcome to The Growth Shift, the podcast where we unlock the psychological and strategic blueprints of predictable growth. If you've built a successful business, you know the truth. Your expertise is high value, but your time is finite. The question is, how do you sustain that success without sacrificing your most valuable asset? We believe that the next level of success requires a strategic pivot, a fundamental shift that moves beyond the old ways. In every episode, we dive into the critical turning points of industry leaders and uncover how they're leveraging AI not as a shortcut, but as the strategic force for their next growth shift. Today, we dive in with a leader who is defining the future of their industry. This episode is brought to you by Valentix, your strategic growth partner. At Valentix, we believe that trust and authentic relationships are the only true currency in high-value business. We challenge the status quo by building an AI-powered client acquisition engine that enhances your human connection, helping you move beyond the slow growth of referrals. Our AI-powered systems eliminate the grind, allowing you to break through the noise, automate tasks, and free up your time to focus on transformative client impact. If you're ready to build a predictable growth engine, learn more at valentix.io. Now let's dive into today's episode. Today on The Growth Shift, we're joined by Leon Castillo, the founder of Self-Mastered and a professor at IE University. Leon's career is a powerful testament to self-mastery and strategic performance, spanning from an architect to a private equity real estate director in Spain, achieving 10 years of career progression in just 30 months. After a pivotal bike accident forced him to rebuild, Leon launched Self-Mastered, a unique firm that uses psychological interventions and AI diagnostics to accelerate the neurological capacity of entrepreneurs and executives. His insights into bridging the gap between knowing and doing, measuring behavioral change, and the critical importance of human judgment in a tech-driven world offer a powerful blueprint for leaders seeking to unlock their full potential. Leon, welcome to The Growth Shift.
Thank you for having me, David.
It's great to have you on the show today. You have quite an interesting journey, and I know a little bit about that growth shift already, which makes it even more interesting as well. You began as an architect. You rapidly progressed to private equity, real estate director in Spain. You moved up the ladder pretty quick there. Tell us a little bit more about your foundational journey. Tell us a little bit more about how this played out and really how you ended up leading a coaching and development practice today.
So I'm an architect by training. In Spain, architecture is typically on average, used to take back in the day, 9 years on average. So it took me 7 years and I graduated at 25. So at 25, I felt I was already behind in life, and I was fortunate enough to get a job in real estate consulting at Deloitte at 28. So I had to do something about the fact that I felt like I was behind. So being an architect is very prestigious in Spain. You're considered a top professional. But in the job market that I started in, that didn't matter at all because there were no jobs for architects. Everybody that was around me had to go to the UK or to China or to the US to find jobs. And I decided to change my career. But I was behind. My own boss was 22, 23 back then. And that's when I realized that I had to do something about it. And I started geeking out on first self-development books. Then I went a little bit deeper on reading actual papers, try to find ways to track my habits, track my mental state, track my growth initiatives, everything that I thought could give me a advantage. So I ended up being the guy who worked the most, also the most effective. I got very fast real responsibility within Deloitte. I was leading AI projects back in the day. This is 2016. We were looking at startups all within the real estate vertical, which was not common back then. And within 30 months, within 20 months, I was scoped by a private equity firm who was opening in Spain. I was involved in startup back then. 10 months later, I became the director. So from being unemployed or starting in Deloitte to private equity director took exactly 30 months. And it all happened because I geeked out on what I thought could give me an edge, and it ended up giving me an edge.
Absolutely did. There's something that I'm curious about here, Leon, something that resonates with me a lot as well, about earlier in your journey, right? You always felt like you were behind. I mean, you graduated as a qualified architect within 7 years, while most people take 9. right? Regardless of that, you felt like you were never where you needed to be, right? This is something that I experienced myself, and I think a lot of top performers and entrepreneurs especially experience. Where I'm going here with this is that today you focus on working with people using neurological principles and influences, and I'm sure that in retrospect this is probably some of what influenced that. But the question I want to ask you here is that when you already felt behind, although you were ahead, right, in architecture, and you couldn't get a job because the jobs weren't available in Spain, people were looking elsewhere, I'm sure that made you feel even further behind, right? Even less in control of your fate or the direction you wanted to go. And most people in this position kind of are influenced by two things, right? One of them might be that chip on the shoulder and that push to succeed, right? And on the other side, it's people who are pulled forwards based off of the impact that they want to have and what it is they ultimately want to do, maybe something bigger than themselves. So if you look back to the situation that you were in, right, feeling behind, perhaps feeling even further behind because the industry that you were in didn't present any opportunities there for you, what do you think at that point in time was pushing you or pulling you, and then why dive into personal development as perhaps the cure or the fix for the situation that you were in?
That's a great question, because it is true that as humans we do have two poles. Either we move away from something or towards something. Back then, what I did, I was very involved in a lot of things, and they were all self-driven back then. So I would, within my architectural school, I would travel the world, like, for 6 months at a time, to very involved in very specific projects. I would seek out opportunities. So that self-led kind of spirit was already within me. But as soon as I found myself without a job at 28, that was literally survival mode, right? So even if I had this past track record of making things happen or meeting important people just by sending a cold email, leading initiatives within the school. I was the first person, for instance, because when I was an architect, I did a bunch of exhibitions. I was the first student-led exhibitions in 130 years in my school. Never happened. It was always through a professor. Bunch of things. So that was within me. But as soon as I found myself without a job, I realized that if I was to kind of survive and learn a whole new skill set and be able to acquire a new set of beliefs about what was possible, the change had to do with my own brain, how I look at opportunities, what actually I believe I could deliver, how much new behavior could I do that would lead to an outcome. So that automatically led me to personal development first, but then to performance at a neurological level to understand how to be a catalyst for that growth. And then I was involved, I was doing startup investing. I realized that the number one problem our founders had before they got the outcomes wasn't not knowing what to do, was not being able to execute at the level their ambition demanded. For whatever reason, right? There are many things happening at the same time. They were trying to do too much too soon, or they were just they didn't have the right beliefs, the right skills, or they haven't really ingrained the right behaviors for them to pitch as much as they needed, for them to follow up as much as they needed, for them to deliver in front of an investor meeting. Whatever the reason was, there was always things jeopardizing their execution. They were very smart people working very hard, but wasting most of that effort. Not because they wanted to, but because they had no option. They hadn't been trained. And that's when I started looking at, well, who are the most elite kind of individuals in the world? Like, they're typically elite performers, special operators, athletes. They're not special. They're trained for many decades until they become, there's a bunch of growth stories like Djokovic, which I admire a lot, how he was able to build himself from the ground up precisely by working at the level of the brain. So at some point I realized that all the work that I've done with myself had been done for decades with elite athletes, and I had just replicated that without me knowing. But at some point I had a major inflection point, which was a personal accident. I had a bike accident that made me wake up on a random Saturday in a hospital with total amnesia. It's called episodic amnesia. I don't remember what happened. I just knew that I went out for dinner and I woke up at a hospital. They found me in the middle of the street. They knew it was a bike accident because they found the bike. So that's something to mention. And then that sent me back to survival mode again, right? So I was one of the fastest growing professionals, top 10 in Spain in finance. Like everything was going for me, but I had that accident. But I had the playbook. So I reapplied the playbook, but then I realized that that playbook could help millions of people. It could actually be a business. It could actually be codified and systematized. And this is how Self-Master was born. First from personal experience, but then from personal necessity after the accident. I don't know if this answers the question.
No, it absolutely does, right? I think it's an excellent display of just your growth and your pursuit of excellence as well, but how it is that you applied that not just to what you planned, but how it is you set yourself up with the foundation, with the skills in the playbook to help yourself continue to evolve even when you're pressed with hard times, right? Because a lot of people who are perhaps pushed instead of pulled towards something might get to that inflection point and ultimately crumble, right? Because they've always been pushed towards something and there wasn't anything greater than themselves, a greater purpose or a greater belief in themselves or anything else at the end of the day. I'm curious here, right? You had that playbook. You already knew how to push yourself forwards and to succeed based off of personal development and everything that you learned. But when you woke up from that bike accident, there must have been something that occurred, right? Whether it was a realization or experience from what happened that allowed you to see the opportunity of helping others apply this playbook for themselves as well. Was there an aha moment maybe, or do you remember what actually led you to that realization?
I just remember that waking up to the fact very violently that anything could end at any moment. Because I never saw it coming. Like it literally went for dinner and I went out to dinner for a minute. For whatever reason, I took a bike and I had an accident. So, like nobody could have foreseen that. I couldn't have foreseen that. And I realized that I have been toiling back then already 4 or 5 years, and anything could end at any time. And I didn't feel. And if that thing ended then, it would feel like a wasted life. I didn't really bring any value other than to our investors investing in real estate developments between 10 and 50 million equity. It wasn't something that I was purposefully connected with, if that makes sense. Yeah. So I needed something that resonated with me. And I just felt that the frame of helping founders, now we do help founders, we've helped executives, top, Forbes, top 30 under 30, like a bunch of people, but founders is who I feel most connected with because I do feel they create the most change in the world. And now every minute spent in this path is bringing me more meaning over time. And the best thing on my week is literally talking to our clients or receiving texts every single day, 1, 2, 3, 4 texts from people who had actually broken through something very specific, landed a very specific meeting or made a very specific hire or doubled the business within 3 months just because they have now solved the capacity gap that we trained them for. Because how we always say it, anyone can achieve anything if the capacity gap is clearly mapped. There's always a distance between who you are and who you need to be in order to get to a specific outcome. And that distance is very precise. It's either skills, it's behaviors, or is skills, beliefs, and behaviors. There's something you don't believe, there's something you don't know how to do, or something you're not doing. If that gap is bridged, it's a question of time. It's a matter of time that you actually bridge that gap. It can take you one day, it can take you a decade, but at some point you'll get there. Not through magical thinking, through careful, systematic planning of the skills, beliefs, and behaviors that need to happen for you to get it. So this is the kind of the biggest shift in meaning because it worked for me first. Now it worked with 400 plus founders, and it's always the same process, mapping who you are, who you need to be, and then actually doing it. And through feedback loops, that growth becomes self-evident very quickly. Because we track it too, right? So one of the big things we do is everything is tracked. So you don't need to convince yourself. You don't need to be in a better mood or have a better vibe. No, it's just KPIs. So we track the specific skills, beliefs, and behaviors that bridge that gap. So over time, you just become an athlete of whatever you decide to pursue. And that's very exciting. That feels like a gift to give.
So Self-Mastery today, then, just to tie that up for the audience, you help entrepreneurs and executives accelerate their neurological capacity and build the bridge from that gap between knowing and doing, right? You mentioned behaviors and skills. I think you gave some good insight as to the approach you're starting to take, but tell us a little bit more. When you come in and you work with a new client, an entrepreneur or a leader who's at point A, right, and there's a significant neurological gap, what process do you take them through to lead them to that end result or to the next result? Let's say there's never an end.
There's never an end. That's the biggest thing that we provide. We provide a methodology that you can run forever, right? We basically train you. How does the brain prefer to execute? Like, what is the actual mechanism in which you maximize learning, you maximize focus, you maximize execution, recovery, right? So we give them a system. And people don't come to us because they feel the gap, but because they feel stuck. They've been working a lot and things are just not working out. There's something that they feel is not working typically in business. So we do two things. The first thing is we give them the system that they can run forever. That how do you actually focus for how long? How do you do? What are the neurological triggers for you to get into a flow state? All of that they get from day one, so they can start compounding. But then within the first week, we run an analysis of their actual patterns. And we do that at 5 levels. Spiritual level, which is the sense of meaning, core values, and purpose, which is the most important thing that typically does not get really well discussed in business. Then we have the mental patterns, which is everything about aligning the cognitive side and the emotional side, right? And the subconscious. So the beliefs, the behaviors, and the skills mostly lie here. Then we have the physiology, which is the energy, the recovery, anything that pertains to showing up with enough energy to actually devote to what you need to do. Then we have the strategic side, which is systems and goals, and the executive, which is about what most people would consider productivity and flow states. So we understand what the gap is based on what they say they want to do, they want to be, and we quantify that through scientific testing. And once we have that, we can adapt the training to what they specifically need. So, for example, it's very common that they will come to us knowing that they can't really focus, and they think it's a focus problem. And the average person would buy a book on focus, or may even try focus meds, which can work for a while, but focus can be a bunch of different things. It can be being pulled in 1,000 directions because your goals and systems are not right. It can be a subconscious block about your self-efficacy, about your own confidence in your ability to execute. If you don't subconsciously believe you can achieve it, you're going to get distracted, and that has nothing to do with the environment. That's an internal. If you're not intrinsically motivated by the work you need to do, you could not sustain focus in the long term. So people come to us they come to us after having read all the books and all the apps, and they still can't execute because, there's a bunch of factors that need to be reorganized. And as we all say, no one is ever broken. No, there's nothing to fix. There's a capacity gap that needs to be trained, just as elite athletes train theirs. Imagine an athlete saying, I'm going to wing it. I'm going to just wing it, and hopefully I win the gold medal. Never works. That's just not how it works. But for whatever reason, on business, we fund founders and we expect them to perform every single day and eventually get that exit, get that whatever revenue they set for themselves, that gold medal. That's, in my opinion, and I come from the private equity and venture capital world, that's why 90% of business end up failing within 10 years. It's not because they don't work hard. It's because they don't have systematically trained the capacity to succeed. Success is a trained capacity.
It's the footwork, right? It's the basics. It's the training at the end of the day that ultimately allows you to sustain growth and, business, personally, whatever it is. So, Leon, from a conceptual level, I'm sure the audience is saying, this is great. This is amazing. Right? From a practical level, can you show us maybe how this really plays out with a client situation? Do you have a story that you could share with us so that we could see how these principles and practices took them from that point of, a neurological gap in self-belief or whatever it was? And you don't have to share any specific names, of course, but could you just tell us about a client, where you met them, where they were at, what needed to change, and what result came? Because you've mentioned some pretty incredible things like 300% growth. Productivity growth is something that you've experienced. Tell us maybe a little bit more about a specific client.
So we run the numbers on case studies. The average revenue growth in 4 months is 2.4x for six-figure businesses. So that is the average. Now we have guys that have gone from 0 to 100K in 7 months. And those guys, or the guy 2K to 130K a month within 9 months. So their stories are very interesting because what they do is they speed run their transformation in a way that it's really impressive. And there's a story about a guy called Carlos, a client of us. I can mention him. It's public. It's in YouTube. Everybody knows about this. Very smart, very hardworking. He was so good. He had in his own, it's all public. He told us he spent 40K in courses in order to become an entrepreneur. So marketing courses, sales courses. He literally spent all his college education in marketing and sales coaches. And he was so good at that he was hired by a very famous marketer in the US as his right-hand man. And his 9 to 5 was really like 8 to 8. And he was in all the events with him and he was consistently leading his growth. And he literally was doing a fantastic job at building someone else's business. That's when he came to us and said, hey, for whatever reason, well, I'm exhausted, first of all, because 8 to 8, I'm exhausted. That needs to be said. But on top of that, every time I have 2 to 3 hours to spare, and even if I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur, it never happens. Like I waste that time. I end up just not doing what I know how to do because I'm doing it for this guy all day long. And he said, well, this to me, that's telltale sign of some sort of subconscious blockage, like for sure. Because if you know what to do, you're clear, you're on the cognitive side, you know what you need to do and you're not doing it, that's the definition of an execution gap. That's typically a subconscious block. So we run the analysis like we always do. We do the 360 and obviously there was not a good enough reason for him at a spiritual level to do the business because he was making great money helping his boss. But also, he didn't believe that he had the ability to sustain what needed to be done because he had seen the tremendous cost his boss had incurred. His boss was now famous, but he was in his 60s. And he said, why would I do all? Like it took him like 10 years to actually succeed, and he wanted the thing done now. So what did we do? We basically, first, we rewired those beliefs. We understood what those beliefs were. We found competing proof that was not the case because, again, we did an inventory of the things he had done in his life, the specific proofs that invalidated those false beliefs, because this is one of the reasons why self-development typically doesn't lead to behavioral change because, for instance, in affirmations, how most people will create them are based on their desires and their dreams instead of actual proof of capability, which is what actually works in rewiring behavior. So we will create an inventory of all of the proof that he had from his own past that he was able to actually entertain action for a long enough period to actually deserve a result. We basically rewired his own belief system. We created a very simple, very, very simple strategy that he could run on 2 hours every single day with very clear triggers for his brain to focus and hopefully start a flow state after he came back home, right? So this needs to happen at 8 p.m. most days. And it worked. It worked very fast. Within 3 months, he was at 10K a month. He had to still pay the loans. And he told me, I'm going to quit my job. I said, not yet. He still did it. And he hit 100K a month 3 months later, 4 months later, at 7 months, right? So, but that is one outlier, obviously, but it proves the point. You can be extremely talented at something. You can have tremendous IQ and work ethic. But if there's any sort of friction, you're going to sabotage yourself. And that is not a personal weakness. There's nothing to fix. It is a trained capability. In Carlos' case, skills were top-notch. He was helping J. Abram with his growth. But beliefs were not, and behaviors were not. And as soon as that is bridged, that growth happens. Now, on average, it's two times revenue within 4 months because, there's a bunch we kind of work on, not only the mind, but also the business, right? Just all of the business systems create friction and founders are working on things they shouldn't be working at all, right? So in essence, that's a great outlier of what can happen when you're crazy talented, but you don't have control or mastery over your own performance. Once that is unlocked, things go up.
An outlier, but an excellent example, right? What I mean by an excellent example is that there's a lot of people who believe that those who are further ahead of them, they don't have any problems, right? When I get there, everything is going to be solved. But no matter what level you're at, there's always internal blockers. There's always reservations or subconscious beliefs that might hold you back in situations, as you said, regardless of your IQ or past successes or what you're doing right now, right? And it's being able to work with, with a coach like yourself or, with Self-Mastered to be able to unlock those things to take you to the next level. That's beneficial to, I think, everybody, regardless of what stage you're at. But Leon, we're talking here, of course, about what it is that you do for your clients and the growth that they experience. If we shift gears here a little bit and we look at Self-Mastered, right? You yourself, leading the company, a student of growth and progress, and displayed, of course, through your own career progression. If we look at Self-Mastered today and what that next level of growth you are pursuing for the company is, one of the biggest drivers of growth, of course, is client acquisition, especially for coaches, especially for consultants. Tell us a little bit more about how it is you're pursuing growth for Self-Mastered with client acquisition in mind.
Beautiful. So we've traditionally relied on referrals for the most part, up to 80%. And then we do a lot of content, especially YouTube, that also drives qualified demand. So those are the two main levers. And now we're launching a very strong LinkedIn game. So also on the content side, but also on outbound. We haven't really started yet, but we're launching it within the next couple of weeks. What we're doing right now, which is the number one focus, is the stats that I throw at you come from actual case studies, where we have something called the execution score, which is, it maps out the gap and the revenue. And we want to make that the standard for personal development or performance in business. So a huge part of the marketing /sales / positioning is going to revolve around quantifying every single one of these growth shifts at a personal level.
Leon, maybe a little bit of direct advice here for the audience, because for consultants, for coaches, referrals is one of the strongest and best opportunities for growth. Slow but strong, right? Referrals are great, especially when you drive amazing results. For those coaches or consultants who might be closer to the beginning of their journey, right, who are having a hard time getting those initial clients, stacking up the results, do you have any advice for them based off of the growth that you've experienced through client acquisition as to how they can put themselves in a better position, or how it is they can start leaning on referrals as really part of their strategy in a more dependable way? Does that make sense?
It does make sense, but I wish I had a magic playbook. I wish I had a magic script that we use with our clients, but we really don't. So the number one focus has always been to deliver way more than we ask for. So they will come to us with, a very specific promise that we would make them, but the transformation would be so sensational that we'll just pay it forward without us having to ask. We've never had really a strategy. I know there's a script. I know I probably could have way more kind of referral stuff, but I don't. I think there's one thing that really helps is that no one kind of tracks performance like we do with data. So that's kind of unique in a sense that people say, well, if you're like the data-driven type of guy, Leon is your guy.
What I'm going to pull out of that is provide more value than people are expecting to receive, because if you can provide more and they can receive more from it, they become champions of what it is that you're doing. So don't just go in and deliver what's in the proposal or what's in the package, but blow them away. Give them so much more. Really extend yourself to a point where they're saying, this is unbelievable. I've seen how much value I've gotten, how much I've grown. I got to tell my friends, I've got to tell some colleagues about this, because this is what they need, is something that I needed for myself. So, I would say that's a strategy in itself.
I have a strategy that I just remembered that I used in the beginning that might be useful. And it's more like a mindset shift. So when I first launched this, I've been doing informally in Spanish for 2-3 years, but nobody knew me on the international arena. Nobody knew who I was. Nobody knew anything about private equity careers. Nobody cared. So a big mindset shift that I had was, of course, over-deliver, but also be very bold in what I was promising, always from the standpoint that if for whatever reason it didn't work out, I would gladly refund the money and they would keep the transformation. So that prevented me from kind of sabotaging myself, thinking, nobody's going to care. Who's this guy from Spain? Like, well, why would I do anything with that guy? So like, if it doesn't work, I never explicitly said it, But I always thought it. If this is not a 10 out of 10 experience, I don't want it. And that allowed me to be very relentless in what I was promising, but also delivering so much on the other side that I became a trusted partner with pretty much every client. Mm-hmm. That helped me a lot.
Yeah, great psychological mindset shift there. I love that. So you're constantly in pursuit of growth. We know this, right? I imagine that referrals, as good as they have been for you, isn't going to be the end game, right? It's not what you're going to stay comfortable with. You mentioned you're investing a lot into content, LinkedIn, YouTube. What else are you thinking about when it comes to expanding your client acquisition growth beyond content and referrals? Is there anything that you've been looking at or considering, to break into that next level?
Well, we do have partnerships on the one side, and then we need to learn how to best leverage AI for our outreach efforts. So there's two big vectors that, they're the future. For a business like ours, that we make people execute at a higher level while staying sane and consistent, partnership are the obvious choice. But I do believe that AI is the new standard, and we need to we haven't really explored it yet, how to build a strong acquisition engine that relies on AI to really find the perfect prospects. Because AI allows us to process way more data points in outreach, and that brings in the ideal clientele, which is in essence what we want. Because if we frame it as elite athletes or elite founders training, there's a very subset of founders who would resonate in a very psychological kind of psychographics. And I'm sure, I don't know how yet, AI can help us tap into that easier.
Yeah, well, I can add a little bit of value here, right? And I think this will resonate with you, Leon, as well. Like, you're really data-driven, right? You talk a lot about KPIs, about tracking performance. AI needs to be used in the same way, especially when it comes to marketing and to cold outbound specifically as well. You need to make sure you have the data right? You can't, cold outbound today is abused with AI because people seem to think that, I have a problem, I don't know how to do cold outreach. If I use AI, it'll know what to do, it'll make that easier. No, you can't do that. You can't expect to give it a general input and expect a high quality output, right? So your data needs to be right in terms of outputs, but also in terms of exactly what it is you're having it do for you. If you're building a list and you're using AI, you need to be very hyper-focused on making sure that the list is being built correctly, but then the next level up from there is making sure that it's being enriched and being sifted through properly so that you can enhance that data. Because AI isn't just here to make things easier, but it is to enhance. It's to increase quality, not just quantity. So especially when it comes to marketing, cold outreach, attracting the right people, you can't lose sight of the data. So in your efforts, I would say, be hyper-focused not just on a platform or a method that you might be using, but what's the data underneath of that to really back it up to make sure that you're not adding to the noise and the confusion that so many people are today.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And for our business hours, we cannot spread kind of mass emails or mass whatever. It needs to be very targeted. So I totally agree with that.
Well, hey, let's chat a little bit more about AI, a little bit more about data. You mentioned a couple of times that you gather a lot of data from your clients. You use AI to enhance that. Where is AI really present in business today for you?
For me, in everything that pertains to the analysis of our clients' patterns. So it's been a godsend. 5 years ago, when we first started, I had to pay a lot of money to consultants, to PhDs, to get experts, to compile like a bank of pattern recognition and actually build our own internal capability to match who the prospect, the founder was, and what the right strategy and the right kind of whole strategy was. So took a lot more time, and what we've done with AI was basically run AI through everything that we had, and now it's the pattern matching is much better, it's faster, and it allows us to course correct. Because for instance, something that is very interesting, another brilliant case study, but it proves the point that I'm about to make. Another guy, the guy who went from 2K to 150K, he literally, we provide them a subconscious programming protocol based on their specific situation and based on the gap that they have. I typically tell people to do this every 3 months. Well, he was doing it every 2 weeks. And every 2 weeks, his growth was so massive that the needs that he had about how to manage himself, how to spend the money that was coming in, how to hire people, how to manage people when he'd never managed anyone, like all of this chaos and complexity that was coming into his life 4 times faster than the average person, we had to rely on that to help him navigate through it. Does that make sense? It would have been a lot of work helping him evolve that fast. Now, that was because he wanted that. He was the one pushing, and he was very risk prone and really wanted to build something big very quickly. And that's the first time that I noticed how AI was really helping us deliver tailored, personalized guidance that evolved every 2 weeks.
So AI is incredibly powerful as a tool to provide analyses, to provide data, maybe to provide this, tailored delivery, tailored plans. Mm-hmm. Yes, very powerful. But in coaching, in consulting, it's more than just data, right? It's relationships. It's leading somebody. It's having intuition to help them move forwards to those next steps as well. So where's that line that shouldn't be crossed, right? As somebody who believes so strongly in, well, I'll start this question again. Leon, as a founder who is so driven by purpose and by results, and as a coach with the measurable successes, yours relationships must be imperative beyond anything. We can see that through the results that you drive and through the referrals that you have had that's gotten you to this point. So when we look at how powerful AI and data can be as part of a coaching process, where does it maybe start to compromise that human element? What's that line that shouldn't be crossed when it comes to the client relationship, and where AI perhaps shouldn't be used as part of the coaching process?
That's a great question. So AI is only going to eliminate coaches who sell information and frameworks. Real transformation requires stakes. Social stakes, requires a relationship with the person who is leading you and helping you reflect on where you want to go. And nobody lies awake at night worried about letting down an app, or that's just not how it works. And the problem with AI is that it is too much of a yes man. It is built to keep you engaged and not to make you uncomfortable. And discomfort is the mechanism that creates growth. Neuroplasticity, which is the core mechanisms that we use to embed those new skills, behaviors, and beliefs, requires discomfort. Without discomfort, there's no growth. But so that's why AI coaches typically do not deliver the same results, and there's plenty of research about this. Transformation requires a human witness. It requires social stakes. It requires a community, and it requires a data-driven system that cannot be gamed, which is why self-directed AI-led coaching cannot work, because it lacks all of the most important elements that actually drive results. And it's very easy to game. And if you truly want growth and transformation, you don't want to listen to what you want. You need to listen to what you need, do it despite your resistance, and having a meaning behind that discomfort. Because discomfort without meaning is what keeps you trapped. And that meaning, you don't find it alone. You always find it through people, with people, thanks to people. So we only use AI in Submaster, in that first week, and every time we need to adjust some of the elements, but for the analysis, for the research, for the pattern matching, to get an understanding. Everything else that we do is always led by me or one of my coaches, or the whole system that we built over these past years.
For any listeners out there who are in that position where they're having concerns that AI is going to replace coaching or consulting, you're going to want to rewind the episode and listen to that again, Leon. That was truly profound and exactly on point. Now, Leon, your story covers self-mastery, strategic performance, and the critical importance of bridging the knowledge to doing gap. For the growth-minded listeners out there who are navigating their own growth shift, what's the single most important piece of advice that you would leave them with about focusing on expanding their capacity for long-term success?
I always tell my clients that there is indeed a secret hack in life. There is indeed something that can accelerate everything for you. And it is not manifestation. It is not woo-woo. There's nothing that typically gets sold in hope marketing. It's a very simple but well-validated and well-researched thing called the feedback loop. Anything you want is at the other side of sufficient iterations. New skill, a new behavior, a new mindset is not behind 10,000 hours. That's pop psychology. It's at the other side of 10,000 iterations. So nothing is off bounds if you are willing to run those iterations. If you can systematically deconstruct any gap, any skill gap. Like for instance, when I was an architect and then I was suddenly talking to Bain Capital or the big London-based funds about billion-dollar purchases of non-performing loans, and I was reviewing Excel sheets. Never seen an Excel sheet in my life. I didn't know what NPL was. I thought it was the Tony Robbins thing. No, it was non-performing loans. And I didn't know what Bain Capital was. So there was a bunch of uncertainty around, but I was called to lead. Like I was told, dude, you manage this, so go do it. So deconstruct the problem, step by step, feedback. What did I learn about the meeting? What did this guy said? Okay, he said that. What does that mean? And over time, with daily feedback loop, this is very important. Most feedback on a corporate setting, you get it, if you're lucky, every 3 months. Most companies don't have it. We, in our system, or the way I do it, and the way I train, is daily feedback loops of anything that happened within the day. And that is what allows for incredible transformation. It looks magic from the inside. So from the outside in, but from the inside is just the deliberate, consistent execution that is data-driven. And the technical concept for this is called deliberate practice. That was studied with musicians and athletes. So long story short, long-winded answer, but there's one hack. It's feedback loops. Map the capacity. Get feedback every single day or where you are in that gap. And before long, you will be a new person because you will have a new brain because you have ingrained what you need to have to bridge that gap. Does that make sense?
Absolutely does. Leon, truly profound. For any of our listeners who might like to learn more about what you're doing at Self-Mastered, what would be the best way to find you?
Selfmastered.com. We'll be honored to chat with them.
Thank you so much for sharing your story and your lessons with the audience today. Leon, thanks again for joining us on The Growth Shift today.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It was an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Another powerful conversation on The Growth Shift. If you, like our guests, are ready to turn your expertise into a predictable, scalable growth engine, one that eliminates the grind of prospecting and enhances your high-value relationships, then it's time to connect with Valentix. We are not a marketing agency. We are your strategic growth partner, building intelligent systems that ensure your client acquisition is predictable, not dependent on chance. To see how our AI-powered frameworks can free up your time and fill your calendar with decision makers, visit Valentix.io. Thank you for joining us on The Growth Shift. We'll see you next time.